So I think I'm a big fan actually of at least like one scheduled sex day a week. Well, preferably, I mean, more than
this
that.
is news to me.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey,
You were very resistant to this thought when I
know,
originally proposed it.
But now I'm not as resistant to it because I'd rather have sex than not
have sex.
So. Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hewitt.
And I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt.
Why do you always say it's silly? I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt.
I don't know.
It was being silly. So today's podcast, we are coming to you with an idea we had. Kendra originally wanted to call it five things to spring clean your marriage. And I thought that was really lame. So we came up with more of a clickbaity one. That's 5 signs that your marriage is in trouble, which I think people are more likely to be like, ooh, I wonder if I have any of those signs. We call them the silent assassins of modern marriage, and how to spot them before they become, before they destroy connection, right? And your marriage. So you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay, good.
I like the silent assassins.
Yeah. I mean, that's much more like, people are much more
masculine than spring cleaning.
Well, it's not about masculine. It's more about like being interesting.
Okay.
Who this shit wants to talk about like spring cleaning?
All right. Let's go.
And that might have worked for a blog or something, but anyway. Okay, so let's talk about sign number 1. So sign number 1 that we came up with was that you act more like roommates than teammates. So like a red flag of that is basically just like coexisting as roommates. So essentially what that means is like you have a shared space where you have each other has your sort of day-to-day routine and process that you follow. And basically it's just all about logistics of running the household and usually the kids and whatnot. So you're not basically pursuing like shared goals. And in that case, there's obviously like a lot of reduced emotional and physical intimacy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think there's sometimes reasons to like I think there's people that like sleep in separate bedrooms, but like,
oh my God, yeah,
that's a real bad sign. But sometimes that's for a purpose. You know, like someone snores really loud or something.
But I mean, that's still like if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're sleeping in a separate bedroom,
yeah,
like you got bigger problems than being.
I always think when I think about this one, I think about a little bit about how like walking that fine line of like identifying that person as your best friend, but like it's just your best friend. Like it's not your best friend.
With
like
benefits.
I think it's
not best friend with benefits.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that the thing that separates you from being best friends is that you get to have sex with one another. Yes.
Well, I also think that like emotionally.
Well, of course, the emotional part. I mean, best friends can be emotionally connected.
Yeah, but not in the same way.
Well, definitely not in the same way physically. That's the most obvious part.
Yeah.
But like, what's an example that you can think of? Because this has certainly happened in our marriage before, where we felt like we've been roommatey, coexisty. No.
I think it's more when we look at like the division of labor in terms of like running a household, even running a business, being a parent. I think you start to feel if there's not a lot of communication about like, hey, I need your help with this. And you start, this is me for sure. Like I just take it on instead of ask you for help.
Yeah.
And then I feel like we kind of start to drift down that path of like, oh shit,
yeah, let's get real. Like life is busy, right? So like, especially for 2 parents that work also. And then, there's a division of labor at home, especially if they have children. And then, so the whole game is like, you got to still do life, but then you still have to prioritize one another. That's the fight back, right? So the fight back is like weekly date night. Okay. That's like non-negotiable. And
weekly, like personal meeting,
but weekly check-ins in a personal meeting. Exactly. And then if you run like us, there's like, oh, we need a fucking meeting for business. We need a meeting for our personal life. We need a meeting for other trips we're going to take. And yeah, so it's just all about creating space where you're only talking about that and not like letting out anything else get in the way. Because what happens is then it's just all about the task stuff. And it's, and then you don't separate like, okay, now it's time to like have fun together or have like scheduled intimacy. Like I used to be opposed to this because I like spontaneous sex. But I found like if you wait for spontaneity to happen as the only type of sex that you're hoping for
at certain seasons of your life.
Okay, whatever. I don't care what season it is. I just want it to make sure it's happening. So I think I'm a big fan actually of at least like one scheduled sex day a week. Well, preferably, I mean, more
this is news to me.
Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey,
you were very resistant to this thought when I
know
originally proposed it.
But now I'm not as resistant to it because I'd rather have sex than not
have sex.
So. Anyways, that's one of the things to do.
Yeah.
Schedule sex, schedule meetings, schedule day nights. Okay, so sign number 2. We could talk about that first one forever. So there's more sarcasm than sincerity. So I think this is a big one. And this is so fucking funny because people from New England, like, they just shred each other, right? That's like, I've seen posts before of like, how you know it's a true best friend. It's like, oh, well, they make fun of you. And that's the way that you love each other. It's like, I don't know. I don't think that's true in a marriage. I think that like, if you're making, if you're always speaking in jest to the person and you're making light of like one of their flaws or their faults, or like it comes across as whatever, passive aggressive, jabs, things like that, where you're just digging into the person, you know what I'm saying? Like there's always truth behind those sort of like sarcastic comments, right? And I think that's a really good way to like destroy intimacy. Especially if you're somebody who tends to hold things in and you're not like confrontational.
Or you take them personally, but you don't like, just like you said, you don't say anything about it.
Yeah. And I think like this was never like, I never would do that to you as far as like, I would make fun of you. I would make fun of you, but only when you'd be like, cause one of the funny things you do is like, you fuck up like traditional sayings, like, oh, you shot yourself in the foot.
I did
it's
it
like,
last
oh,
week
yeah,
on
I
the
shot myself
podcast.
in the face. Like, oh
I said that. I meant to say derailed train, and I said the rail trail, which is the trail behind our house.
Rail trail, yeah. So that's funny. I mean, there's just funny like word things you fuck up, which is funny. But as far as like I wouldn't make fun of like a certain thing that I know that is like an insecurity of yours or whatnot. But I think that what I would do in the past is I would be critical, right? So, and I think this runs in the same vein as like sarcasm and like making jokes about, you know, something somebody's insecure about. So like criticism is a really good way to like destroy intimacy. What about you? What do you think?
I mean, I think about how sometimes like some of the things, if I don't really think about it before I say it, sometimes can come off as condescending. And that definitely erodes intimacy. I think that one of the things that I like that we talked about a little bit before was sarcasm is the language of the emotionally unavailable. It sounds cute until it starts to build resentment.
Ooh, that's good. Did you just come up with that?
We have it on there.
Oh, okay.
Wow, I sounded really intelligent right there, but I thought about that a lot because I was like, I think you're right on to something. Is like New Englanders tend to have this like kind of sarcasm.
It's like a joking banter, but it's
like, a joking banter where,
especially guys.
What I thought about when you just said that too was even about how it's not just New England, but how when we were with a power couple friends of ours, and they were talking about how they got invited to a baby shower. And they went to the baby shower and they didn't really know. They knew the guy that was having the baby, and they were starting to do some business with him. Yeah. And so they went to the baby shower, and they didn't know anything about his family or the wife's family, and how uncomfortable they felt because the way that this family showed love was
To make fun of
by
him.
cutting him down.
Yeah, they
Like
gave him
making
like a
him feel like he was going to be so inept as a parent.
well, they joked around because they gave him like a gift, like it's a shower, right? So, but they gave the wife the gift of diapers for the husband, right?
Yes.
In joking that like, oh, little Johnny is going to need you to wipe his ass.
And what they were saying, the couple that went to this shower was saying how uncomfortable they felt and how like fucked up it appeared that like
because she saw through that.
She saw through what their actual hurts were and what their actual, like, she could tell that the guy that they were teasing, he was laughing because that was what he probably did his whole life. Yeah. But underneath, he definitely was like responding to it. Like you could see an emotional response of like, hey, my family thinks I'm an idiot and I'm going to fuck this up. Right. Like,
yes. So,
and so the reason I said that is that like, that over time really builds resentment where it's like, hey, you know what? I don't want to spend so much time with my family because you know what I start to realize is that they actually make me feel like shit, even though they're funny about it.
Yeah. Imagine that's your spouse, right?
Yes. So imagine then that's where I was going. Imagine that's kind of not your family now. That's your spouse.
Yeah. And that's kind of like you think of the old married couple, right? Of like, oh, hurry up, Mary, or whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I think the way that you like realizing that early on and then having that uncomfortable confrontation is what you need to do. What?
I was just thinking about how like when we went on our long hike and you were calling me
what?
Peg leg.
Oh yeah.
And it was funny, but I was like really pissed about it.
Were you?
Oh yeah, just because you're like, you are so, it made me feel like I was like so like not athletic and like not capable and like we were laughing about it, but at the same time it was like but like here's the thing, I am a sensitive person, right? So where to draw the line on that. But like how it would show up for me is I would get mad at you. I'd be like, well, why don't you help me then? Why don't you teach me how to not be peg leg? Why don't you like, help me with some mobility stuff? So, but the reason I bring that up is that like, just like when there's more of that, then there is the sincerity of like, hey, Kendra, I have some tools, which you do have, that I could like show you like, hey, here's how you could mobilize your calves more or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Yeah. Mobilize your calves.
Yeah. Or I'm just throwing that out there as an example.
Those cows that you have, yes.
Yeah. See? Sarcasm.
Yeah, see? I told you. But so the whole thing we're saying is like make sure that there's more complimentary language and like language of building each other up and affirmations rather than cut down. It's not like you can't make fun of each other and have fun, right? But it just means like if that's what you're doing and it gets to the point where it's hurtful, you either have uncomfortable conversations or you work on having better communication.
Yeah. And like, I was thinking about how like when we used to do CrossFit and like the warm up, I would pray that it wouldn't be like grapevine and like high, like kick knees and stuff like that. And like,
are you making fun of your own hip mobility?
Yes. And but when I think about it that way, it's more funny, but it's like, when you comment on it, then it's like, and like I said, this is a physical comment, but still like those things, those little digs, especially to someone, if they're very sensitive, they add up.
Yeah. Have I created an insecurity about your hips? No,
I already know they suck.
So number 3, you keep score, but the truth is nobody wins, right? So this is what we call horse trading, right? So in other words, like I did this, so you owe me that. What comes up when I say that, like keeping score? Well, obviously, like it's not 50-50, it's 100-100, right? So it's not like, as the saying goes, right? You need to be, if you want to be somebody who is giving, you don't expect to receive, right? You're always giving just for the sake of giving to the person because you love them and you want to fill them up and you care about them, right? And if you're coming from that place, then it will come back to you. But like when I say like keeping score, what do you think about?
Well, I think that this can really happen to a lot of people in relationships at different periods of their relationship. The one that comes up the most for me is like when I became a mom, because I think about like all of these added things that were going to be naturally added to my list. There were things that like I could only do. But this is where I think it magnified like how hard it is for me to ask for help, like how much I struggled with that. And then I started silently keeping score of like, okay, like I did this, and then like you haven't like done this. You haven't taken Lily out in 3 days, but I've been here and done every meal. And I would start keeping score that way.
Yeah, and then it turns into like, wow, I'm at work making money, and
Yeah,
I'm
and
at
then,
home taking care of your kid, and
yeah,
it turns into that
and
tit
like
for tat shit.
in a kind of like that element of keeping score for me really that really wore on me, but I wasn't really like as conscious about it, I don't think. But I think like keeping score of like comes up often for people in different ways. Like, hey, I got dinner last time, and like you have like that's a really like horse trading one that I feel like comes up a lot.
Well,
financially.
Yeah. So, well, I think our situation's unique because we run businesses together. So we sort of like we our income that we make is ours. But like couples that have separate incomes, I feel like that could be a place where they have to have strong communication about like, what do we do with our money? I think money's a big one when it comes to the horse trading thing. Sex is another big one.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one.
I know for me, like in my brain, I'm like, man, I feel like I haven't had sex in a while. And I'll think about, well, how many times did we have sex this week? And then Kendra will remind me, like, I had sex with you twice already this week. And then, so it becomes like a game of keeping score.
I don't say it like that.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to keep score. I want to just like, let's have it as much as we possibly can. But you're like, nope, 2 times is what we agreed on that I'm going to make an effort to do.
Well,
and it's the same, but hold on.
But
then it's the same thing with like, well, acts of service. So when we talk about like, this is where like knowing your spouse's love language is really powerful, because Kendra knows mine is physical intimacy and touch. So when she wants to like make sure she puts the deposit in my bucket, then she knows that's the ultimate way. For me, I know that she wants acts of service. So I will give her time and take Lily off of her plate. That's kind of that's how I can gain the most bonus points right now. So you can go ride your horse or teach your horse lessons or just do some work and get some things done you want to get done off your list so you can have completion
loop.
Yes. But I don't purposely don't keep score and remind you, because that would drive you nuts. Same thing when I tell you that, it's like, oh, well, here's how I gave you time and here's how I did the deposits. It makes me as insane when you're like, oh, well, I touched you, this day and this many times on that day.
I don't say that.
But that's like a way that we have kept score before. Not on purpose, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it's not healthy. So the fix it, right? So obviously giving without the expectation of receiving, which I think is difficult for some people. I know it's difficult for me in a way. I think that I've had to teach myself like gratitude and how to give without the expectation to receive. I think that's not as natural for me. I think it's more natural for you. But especially, I mean, it's probably the case that one spouse is better at it than the other. Okay. So sign number 4, you avoid hard conversations. So I think this is a really huge
I think
problem.
This is probably the biggest one on the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes those conversations are not obvious. I think some people stuff things down so deep and for so long that they've forgotten even themselves that this is something that's important to them, or that's like eroding their happiness or their marriage. And then in some cases, like it'll boil up to the surface in weird ways, like in strange emotions. And it's not even like, that's not even the issue. It's just this underlying thing, whether it's like, money or sex or boundaries or a parenting, discussion you haven't had. So we wrote down here that avoidance isn't peace, it's delay, right? And what you delay will decay. So what's something that comes to mind for you that was like a powerful conversation we've had that was like one that we avoided that was causing problems?
Well, I think just even recently, like we've got really in this habit of kind of checking in on our finances. our personal finances, because our business finances, we have regular like metrics and stuff like that we talk about. But when it comes to our personal, we realized that we both kind of really operated very independently. And then I think that was,
or just at our own default.
Yes. And I think that we had a conversation where it was like, typically our conversations about money, they go south pretty quickly, not in terms of what we're talking about, the actual facts, but the delivery of the facts, right? Is
You've admitted this?
Yeah, I'm admitting it right now.
Wow.
And so I kind of come off as like kind of like scolding at times, condescending, and I take for granted some of the things that just like make sense to me when it comes to money. And then like even a conversation we just had about like paying off your truck. And like I was like, wait a minute, you haven't done that yet? And then like we kind of went down, and then we got down to the bottom of it. You took care of it. And like then like I think about yesterday about how like you even sent me a picture of your credit and you were so proud. I remember you wanted like,
I wasn't so proud. I just wanted you to know what it was.
No, but here's what was really cool about that, you sharing that, was because I remember when you first moved to the US, you had no credit, no American credit.
Of course not. I was an immigrant.
Okay. And
legal immigrant.
I know.
By the way.
And then what ended up happening was that I had some like knowledge about building credit and stuff, that primarily from investing, like with my background of that. And I was thinking about how it was so cool because I know you were always chasing, you wanted an over 800 credit score. And you used to like monitor your credit, which you still do. And then like if it dropped like 10 points, you would send me a message and it would be like, what the fuck? Why is this drop? And you'd be like, did you do this or something like that?
I haven't done that for a long time.
You haven't.
No.
But then when you paid off your truck, it made your credit score go crazy, right?
Well,
and you hit that over that 800.
My
and
debt to income ratio is good right now. Yes.
Right. So what I wanted to say is that that was a great opportunity where I was like, wow, that conversation kind of came full circle of like, hey, like, why haven't you paid off your truck, was how I kind of led, which wasn't the best way to lead. And then we got to a point of like where it was evened out, and I was like, but that was a hard conversation because I didn't want to make you feel bad about the fact that it didn't happen, but I knew it had benefits. Yeah. And it also gave you some confidence and empowered you that you're like, hey, you were being smarter with your money.
Yeah, so that's a great example of like how a hard conversation can turn into something that is good, turns into a massive positive. And I think for a lot of couples, there will be those hot buttons, right? So like money for us is, and part of it is because, and a large part of it is because like money was a huge problem for me growing up. Like I had a good upbringing. Like I wasn't in the poorhouse. I didn't grow up in a trailer park, right? But I grew up in nice homes and nice neighborhoods, but there was a major scarcity. It was always scarce. Like I never had like
there was stress around money.
There was big time stress around money. And I never had allowances or anything like that. So it was always like this thing that was, yes, it had I don't want to say that a negative connotation, but it was definitely it was a hot topic, stress, lots of fighting and whatever. So that's what I absorbed in my physiology. And it's still today, like part of, I've had to do a lot of work on my money mindset, on my like understanding of money and my handling of money and whatnot. And I think that money's not like a standalone thing that it has charged emotion around. Like that could very well be sex, right? If you've had any sort of like, trauma around sex, especially, that could be a massive rub in your marriage. Right. And you've shared some of that, of your own journey with that. So, I mean, we've had multiple really hard fucking conversations around things like, I think sex and money are probably the two biggest hot buttons, I would say.
I think like for us,
and we've had like trauma in both.
I think for a lot of people, that's very,
yeah. And just so you know, like you can work through that if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, just creating that, like, you have to create the space to have those talks, and they're not always going to go well.
And I think when it comes to avoiding hard conversations in this context, we're talking about conversations that like you kind of sweep under the rug because they're hard for you. I'm not talking about major things like, hey, do you want to have another kid? Or like, like those kind of like, or like, like,
Well,
hey, have you been like, watching porn? Or like those are hard conversations too.
Yeah.
But I'm talking, those are more magnified hard conversations that take a lot more level of work. I'm talking about hard conversations right now that like, or we're talking about hard conversations right now that you could like easily address and work through if you just committed to.
If you wanted to, yeah. Yeah, I think it's easy to sort of shut down or just say, forget it.
Or avoid it.
Yeah, or avoid it. So those are like conversations that are not difficult to have, but they're very difficult to solve. Right. But there's also conversations that are very difficult to have because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of like those topics you shared. So just like having a safe space, and then consider working with a therapist on things that are very difficult for you, because it really does create that space for you to like, okay, this is when we start to address these things to like a neutral third party, and you'll be surprised what comes out of your spouse's mouth. Sometimes you'll be like, holy fuck, what? That's actually what you believe. That's what you think. Like, and sometimes it'll shock you, like in a good way. Because they've never had the safe space and the opportunity to share it with you because they didn't trust to share it with you.
Or they never learned that, like they didn't model that from their family, most likely.
Yeah. Number 5, in fifth and final, you fantasize about escape more than adventure. This is clearly a bad red flag, right? If you're like, you daydream about being alone or escaping to like, a private island by yourself, not even with somebody else. Like it doesn't even have, like, clearly if you're fantasizing about being with somebody else, like there's a big problem. But if you're fantasizing about like just being apart from your family, like apart from your spouse, especially, like that's a big problem. If you don't foresee like your fantasy that includes your spouse, then like that's a big red flag to me,
Absolutely. I think too, I think about I think it was around 2017 when we were really struggling, like we were disconnected, and I was starting to question like, man, this was before I even knew some of the stuff that had gone on. And I remember this one time, I think you were going to, I want to say you went to Kokoro. And you were physically like
2016.
You were physically doing a beat down like of your body. And I think about how that while you were there, like literally in the desert, like surviving on a perfect food bar you found in your pants, that you really, I was like, man, I remember I went to like a dance or a party. It was a fundraiser of some sort. And I just remember dancing and just being like, man, this is what it feels like to have fun. I'd forgotten what it feels like to have fun. And I almost started.
Meanwhile, I was on the brink of death and you were out having fun.
And I felt guilty about that. Don't worry. But I also started to see that pattern of like, oh man, I'm going to escape rather than like, hey, what can we do together?
Yeah.
And then obviously we really rectify that. But I think that is a really big, huge part of this, is that like looking at the what areas are you saying like, hey, I would want to escape from that you actually need help with, instead of like, hey, I would like to plan an adventure.
Yeah, I think it's like, hopefully it's as easy as that. Like you just start planning adventures together and like you start having fun with one another. If you're not even in a place where that's even something you would entertain together, then like you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's just like, hey, we need to start prioritizing ourselves. Like, let's schedule a trip, just the two of us this year. Like I've talked to some people that are like, oh my God, we're just in the blender with our kids. And like, I'm like, well, I ask people this on purpose and the practice all the time. I'd be like, hey, when's the last time just you and your wife went away on a vacation? And you'll be shocked. Some people, they're like, oh my God, I don't remember. Or I like never.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, like how are you guys like surviving as far as like your desire to like be with one another and have fun together and like, just rekindle that sort of spirit of what got you together in the first place. And I mean, I think, our trip to Tulum last year was I think the biggest reminder for me of like, wow, this is what I've been missing. This is what, like, that feeling of just being free with you for even just a few days felt like again. Yeah. And it's one of those things that now that I remember what that's like, I'm like, I will spend as much money as it takes to do that with you. Like, we're planning right now, it's our 15th anniversary this year, and we want to do something special. So we're planning a trip to Croatia. And I would have never like participated or got excited about it or told you like how I wanted to look before. But now, like, I understand that investment and how special that's going to be. And I want it to be for us and like for our future, right? That investment is just like, it's everything.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, so plan a vacation together, just the two of you.
Yeah. And I like that one of the things we wrote down was create like a bucket list of stuff you would want to do together.
Yeah,
you know, because there's things
that's
that like
huge.
I would want to do with our family that are different than the things that I would want to do with you.
Somebody, let me just interrupt one sec. And I'm going to start using this. I asked them, I was like, well, how's your vacation? They're like, oh, you mean my trip? I'm like, and I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh man, that's good. Cause I knew he went with his kids. I was like, oh, I get it. He's like, yeah, you know, it's a vacation when it's just my wife and I. It's a trip when it's me and the kids. I'm like,
I agree with that.
That's huge, which are both valuable, right? So they're both great. But make sure you are taking trips and vacations.
And like, that's a great place to close, is like intentions, everything, right? So intending to plan a trip where you go on a trip with your family, you know what you're going to expect, versus you get to go on a vacation with your significant other. You're going to have a different expectation. And setting that gives you some freedom to actually like know that.
Yeah.
And I think it gives you a different experience.
All right, well, let's wrap it up right there. So can you remember the 5?
Good thing we wrote them down.
Yeah. So roommates, not teammates, more sarcasm than sincerity. You keep score, even though nobody wins. You avoid hard conversations, and you fantasize more about escape than adventure together. So we will challenge you to pick one of these. If any of you identified with any of these, like, you know, don't panic, like figure out how you're going to start working on one of those things, whichever one, or if there's multiple, you know, which one are you going to start working on? You know, talk about it with your spouse. Just start, you know, no phones, no distraction, no TV, no judgment, just like raw honesty about like, hey, I'm noticing this, like, I want to work on it this way and see where it goes.
I agree. And I agree with too, is like pick one, not all 5 on here's how I do all 5.
Hopefully you're not having all 5 signs, because that's rough. So
you need more than us.
All right, you close it up this week.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Weaponized Marriage Podcast. If this information was valuable, please share it with someone that it might also help. And then, as always, please rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.